Okay, hey, welcome to Wwise Up On Air. Hope you're doing well out there. We got an exciting live stream for you today. We're going to be talking with the audio team behind It Takes Two from Hazelight Studios. And super excited to go deep on this. This is a game that people have been talking about. There have been a ton of presentations around articles, but we're going to go real time with the folks who put these sounds and interactive, just delightful experiences together. So feel free to weave questions into the chat and we'll try to bring those to the live stream and see if we can't make this a dynamic live stream about It Takes Two. But first, I want to do what we usually do here at Wwise Up On Air first, and that's a little bit of news about Audiokinetic and Wwise, and then a community spotlight for folks who are doing cool things out in the community. And this is really why we're here at Wwise Up On Air, is to try and bring this knowledge share and the passion for the community and our Wwise developer community together towards all the cool things that we're passionate about here in interactive audio. So with that, let's talk about documentation. This is something that, come on, passion? Yeah, I've got passion for documentation because it is the thread that we weave between our experience and the truth of the software that we use. And so one thing that you'll notice right off the bat, if you've been a long time Wwise user or documentation peruser, is that we've given the whole documentation pipeline online a spruce up, a fresh look. And so this has been a huge effort by the documentation team at Audiokinetic, and really an effort to tie together all of the threads in a way that gives you the accessibility to the information. So whether you're looking for SDK perspective, you want to go deep all the way to that low level, or you're looking for information about our sample projects, our integrations. The documentation is there for you to dig deep and find out what you need to help you on your way in your interactive authoring. So huge congrats to the folks at the documentation team here at Audiokinetic for pulling that together, the web and launcher team. Just a ton of work to try and bring that connectivity to your understanding of Wwise. So good to see folks in the stream. Yeah, all right. Rob Bridget's representing. And a bunch of other folks, good to see you. Thanks. I mentioned we're talking It Takes Two today, and if you might have noticed, we had an interactive music symposium that featured half a dozen different talks and panels, and one of those was talking about before the tech and unfreezing a town with story and transitions in It Takes Two. So we had Christopher Eng, the composer and CEO from Elias Software, and Gustav Grefberg, composer behind It Takes Two from Hazelight Studios. So this is a video available on our YouTube channel, so dial that in after this live stream and go deeper into the music and composition for It Takes Two. Again, just a knowledge share, trying to weave this thread for creatives out there who are working with Wwise or working with interactive audio in some capacity, the cool tricks and tips that people are leveraging to make their games sound great. Digging into a little community spotlight, there's an incredible video that Francesco Del Pia put up from the game Unboxing. And I'm going to play a little bit of that for you now. Here it comes. is a simple game. And in this video, it's all about surface. So we hear this metal canister set down across different surface types, and the amount of detail to this simple interaction on the audio side really brings a kind of reality to that interaction. And it's that level of detail that is something that we reach for as audio professionals, as audio designers, and it's really cool to see game using Wwise here. And thanks to Francesco for uploading that video, and thanks to the folks at Unboxing. We hope to hear more from them soon. Talking about other cool things with Wwise, Daniel Nielsen, a game audio developer, has created a couple of games using Wwise. And so that's, you're saying to yourself, well, Wwise is an audio middleware tool to make sound for games, but he's actually created games inside of Wwise that you can play with the Soundcaster. So this is a whack-a-mole that uses the Soundcaster and events and states to actually play a kind of fun little game. And he didn't want to stop there, and so he made what he says is maybe the silliest run for your life scary robot game, and you can check him out on Twitter at G-Scale, but definitely take a listen to these videos, and it's incredible what folks can do with Wwise. Games inside of it? Sure, why not? This last piece that absolutely blew my mind, and I think Kevin Regami's mind as well, on Real Talk. And if folks haven't heard of Real Talk, this is a live stream from Power Up Audio. They talk about demo reels and give tips to the game audio community on how they present themselves. And this is a great one. I'm going to roll the video here.
That's all right. Let's go.
What? And that was exactly my reaction as well. So slowing that down, what we had the sound of a car engine played back with Wwise, and Mike Romniak has used the CPU profiler, or the number of voices, and in a game engine has coded for the setting of those in order to spell his name in the Wwise profiler. And it's awesome. Like, if you know what's going on behind the scenes here to pull that off, he's got some great shading and everything. It's a pleasure to see that kind of creativity happening inside of Wwise. Love seeing that stuff. So with that, I'm going to transition to our presentation today from the folks at Hazelight, and let me just introduce them. Hello and welcome to Wwise Up On Air. Great to see you
everyone.
Today.
Hello.
Hi.
And welcome everyone all over the world. We see in the chat that there are people from everywhere, really. So that's super nice to see.
Yeah, awesome. So let's get some introductions underway first. If you'd like to go ahead and start, Philip.
Yeah. So my name is Philip Eriksson, as you can see there in the text. I work as the lead sound designer at Hazelight. I started about 3 years ago, and came from DICE before and some linear media and stuff. And then quickly after I started, my dear friend Joakim started.
Yeah, just like Philip says, I joined Hazelight April of 2019. Time flies. And I joined as the technical sound designer, which is that's what I do to this date. And I believe just like maybe 2 weeks after me, you arrived, Anso?
Yes, we arrived pretty much all at the same time, nearly, in the grand scheme of things. So yes, my name is Anne-Sophie Mongeau. I've been at Hazelight for just under 3 years, and I'm the senior sound designer here.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we're so
That's
glad to
us.
have you here. And again, like the arrival and intersection of you as a team, like I feel like what you have pulled together to create during your time together is extremely impressive. The cohesiveness of things. Did you have roles or areas of specialty that you gravitated towards? Again, I know that we have technical sound design, you know, there's representation, there's the compositional wing of Hazelight as well. How did you come to the combination of your talent and skills?
So I feel like, at least for me, myself, it was, of course, recruiting the right people, which we for sure did. But then something that we always strive for in the Hazelight Audio Team was that we would be like quite general, of course, with our skill sets and specialities and, you know, things that we like and things that we don't like, but to be able to do a lot of stuff. So me and Anne-Sophie, we are very involved in all the technical discussions and like innovations and so on. Of course, Joakim and our programmer Göran, they take care of the actual, like, you know, making it a thing that at least I can't do. But Joakim also made quite a bunch of sounds, and we tend also to try to get to make a lot of different sounds. So it wasn't like, okay, Anne-Sophie, you're the weapons specialist and I only make cars, and Joakim, you only make footsteps. Now we're trying to like mix it up to be able to also not be so tired of, like, you know, making the same kind of thing over and over again. So that's at least how I feel.
Yeah, I think that we knew from the very start when this team was created that we were on a time pressure, so we needed a team that would be efficient, like on all fronts at the same time, and we could all work together and put all our skills together and spread the workload so that it would make sense. So we didn't go for, you know, a bigger sound design task force than a technical task force. Like it had to balance itself. So I would say that we're kind of equal in that sense. And so we worked a lot together and in collaboration on those different fronts. And like Philip said, on the sound design side, I think we kind of naturally fell into a little bit of very, very soft specialties, just because it kind of started to make sense as well when you start to know very much like systems and such. But it was nothing close to exclusivity. Like any one of us could have taken over somebody else's work.
Yeah. And also one thing that I could add, especially for Joakim, like when we started, when it was like pretty much just the three of us, we were actually four, because Gustav Grefberg, our composer, he was also already at Hazelight when I started. But we had basically as much need for technical skill as we had for creative skill. So we needed to have a diverse team in that sense, and also trying to be more of like an organism of audio team that just pushed through this game and just, you know, left content everywhere and systems and so on, but not to just take like, okay, we do all the footsteps for all these levels or whatever, you know, or all the interactables for this level. We more pushed through the game as like pretty actually linearly, and also from like the first level to the last level, of course jumping around a little bit. But
and did that mirror the development style as well, where at the game design side, you know, they started working on the first level first, and you were able to just move through in that way? Or was there still a lot of jumping around and foundational elements that would propagate throughout the game? You want to talk about that?
You can take it.
Yeah, like I think, like generally we kind of always as a team seem to find our way of doing things, and then, you know, we're definitely in the camp of asking for forgiveness rather than permission, I think. But definitely like how it is, like this game was constantly being shaped around us as we were we were just taking our first steps into this game, right? Like like we've just established, like the team was brand new. We were all getting to know kind of each other as we were getting to know this game and starting to figuring things out, and literally starting from a position where we had no audio engine, we had no assets, we had nothing, right? And I feel like at this time, like the game was still fairly experimental in like how levels would look like and what the flow would be, but a lot of like the core content and like the movement and general gameplay was already there. You guys correct me if you don't agree, but like that's how I at least remember it. And
yeah,
I feel like we had like pretty good picture of like, okay, this is what the game is going to be. But like as for like in what order will these levels develop, and like in which way will we be able to tackle them, we had a pretty good plan though. I think you should talk a bit about that, Phil.
Nice.
Yeah, I guess like one of the reasons like why we also chose to work like very much like level per level, and with the whole audio team as one group and one team, really like super solid team, was to be able to get a relationship with each other and to learn our skills and so on.
Nice.
And also because for myself, I had never worked with Wwise, I had never worked with Unreal, so it felt like we needed everyone to be. We needed all the specialities in one, group and in one place in the game to be able to utilize that very well. So we started with a level, and we started with like a vertical slice for that level, and then we went on to another level to do a kind of a vertical slice there. We quickly saw that we needed to create all of these systems, and we basically like created them on the fly. And then when we went to the next level, we had to make a shit ton of new systems because we needed something completely different for that level. So but it was a strong thought from my end, like that we would really keep the team as a group, and that was not like always even liked from the studio side, you could actually say, but I felt like it was so important. And when looking back at It Takes Two now, and we have had some like post-mortems and so on, at least within the audio team, we have all liked this a lot because we feel like we can really work well together and it goes smooth. And we can build up things from like, ambiences, footsteps, world sounds, gadgets, abilities, weapons, whatever is in that level, systems, music, VO. And then in the end, we could actually do like pre-mixes after like, some months of work. And that was very crucial, I think, in the beginning of It Takes Two, because we were all so new. So we needed something to be able to discuss direction and styles and what we were able to do, basically.
Yeah, I love this idea of the focus on a level as part of the team building cohesion and part of probably establishing the tonality and working methodologies that will carry you through development. And of course, Hazelight not starting from scratch with the cooperative gameplay style. So you must have started from a place where you had a very clear idea of how Brothers was successful in its ways, and I guess I draw a direct line between the two games in their cooperative elements at the very least. So it sounds like having the clarity of vision from the studio helped you, immediately understand what was going to get made, even in its early experimental form. And so when it came to systems planning, you could see the future because you knew the past. And as you were saying, the important piece there was bringing your team together, getting that cohesion, and getting on the same page with making the game sound great. And I think it paid off.
At the same time, like It Takes Two, if you compare it to A Way Out and also Brothers, has like so much more complexity. So each level was like a new Mount Everest to climb, it feels like. And we did that during one sprint. And then we usually had like 1 week that we called the buffer week, where we could breathe for a little bit. And then it was the next mountain.
Yeah, I would say like it's a bit of a double-edged sword, that situation. Like there's definitely a lot of truth in what you say there, Damien, in that like Hazelight, I feel like, especially today, we have a internally we have a very good idea of like how we want to build a split screen game, right?
Yeah.
But like for us coming into this, there was also a lot of kind of like actually breaking out of the mold for how audio had functioned and lived previously in these games, especially so in, I would say, A Way Out, which was the previous game before It Takes Two. And we were a completely new team again, and we definitely felt that, you know, we will take whatever we can and learn from that. But we were from the onset very focused on, you know, treading our own ground and making our own soundscape with this. So certainly there was a lot of like good knowledge about like, okay, here's how we handle, you know, the player perspectives and the viewports and the cameras and the movement. And with these, like with It Takes Two, there's also networking, right? Because you can play it, it's not only couch co-op, but you can also play it over network, which just adds a ton of complexity, right? So we could leverage all of that knowledge. We have all of that knowledge in-house in all the departments, which was great for us. Yeah. So we could take that, but then for kind of the audio side of our development, you know, we kind of ran with whatever felt made sense to us, and we kind of had to impose these new ideas, you know, throughout the studio, which is, you know, our first months, that was our work really, and like kind of breaking down assumptions and ideas and prejudices about like how audio functions in the kind of split screen game that Hazelight makes. Right. So like we didn't, I wouldn't say that we met resistance. We just met like curiosity, and people were like, you know, we opened up people to new ideas, I think, which was a cool process, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great comments there towards audio advocacy within a studio and being that voice of change, and yeah, helping people understand the value in the scenario, and carving your own path. Well, I'll throw it back to meeting Philip at a game developer conference, you know, quite a few years ago, and some of the first conversations that I had here at Audiokinetic were with you as you were ramping up the project, and so I really value that interaction that I've had with you both personally and professionally over time, and think that, you know, during the course of my time here at Audiokinetic, I have seen the team there as, you know, a collaborator towards this goal of creativity and interactivity, and so it's great to hear that you were able to push into this with a vision, and that you felt equipped and to deliver something that is incredible. And with that, how would you like to jump into some examples for folks? And let's get rolling on some of the cool things that you've pulled off in It Takes Two.
Yeah. So I guess if we could bring up Wwise, we wanted to start from that end.
You bet.
So as you see now, we are showing our work unit structure, and we thought that it was interesting to just sort of go over this a little bit, because of course it might differ from project to project, but also because it's split screen, it will be a little bit different. And also because it was me who made it, most of it at least, and then people added. And I just wanted to start with saying that this is my first game that I work in Wwise and use Wwise. So this was basically my first footsteps into Wwise, you could say. And I, of course, got a lot of help from Joakim and Anne-Sophie, who are super, super talented in using Wwise. But I felt like I needed to start making this structure so that I would also know how Wwise works, and be able to mix and implement things without thinking too much and knowing where to go in the structure myself. So as you see, we have like some sort of common groups like cutscenes, gameplay stuff, characters. We have some VO, of course, music in the music interactive music hierarchy. But we wanted to go into the characters a little bit deeper. So if Joakim can steer the boat in the right direction.
See if I can.
Yeah, because this is one of the first bigger systems that we actually started to create, and it has some interesting features and ideas behind it. So we can go into the movement work unit as well, I think. So for It Takes Two, for those of you who don't know, we have two playable characters, Cody and May. So we of course needed to create footsteps for both of those characters. But we wanted to open the Pandora's box for sure, but enough, not too much, not too little. So we have a bunch of different work units here containing all the sounds that are needed for our dear characters. Actions could be like jumping and so on. Some body movements, mostly loops. We will go into that a little bit. We have some videos that we will show you. Some hand movement because we can do a lot of climbing and wall sliding and so on. Idle animation sounds, landings, and also a little bit of special stuff for side content. But we can go into the footsteps work unit to look at that. So we have a bunch of different actor mixers here. As you can see, we really heavily used actor mixers so that we could apply RTPCs and parameters in smart ways. One of the things that we will talk quite a lot about is our panning. So if you, Joakim, show the balance fade, we can look at that one quickly. So we actually, even though, it's on the higher on the
there
master.
we go.
Yeah.
That sweet inheritance of the Wwise.
Yeah,
exactly.
Where are we at?
Exactly.
That's the question.
So even if we pan the movement of the characters statically, it's statically because we have a parameter that we basically decide where on the 2D plane that the movement will be panned. But depending on the camera perspective, we can also modify that. We also do some modifications depending on if you're playing in speakers or in headphones, because we pan both the VO and the movement quite heavily actually in speakers to the left and to the right. But in headphones, we didn't want to do it as drastically. We also utilize the center speaker a lot more than most other games do, because we wanted to have the mix or the panning of the footsteps, for example, between the left speaker and the center speaker, so that we would get a little bit of width at least. So yeah, that's that. We also, I think we can, if you turn down the speaker panel, we see some other RTPCs. So for example, Cody, for one level, he could actually change size. And we didn't make too much new content for that. Instead, we pitched it up and down, so you can be really, really, really tiny or huge. So those RTPCs are only on Cody's actor mixer, not on May's. But we can move on to the footsteps. So one thing that you will notice when we go into this hierarchy is that we don't use switches at all. And that is because we used the event-based packaging that Joakim will speak a little bit about soon. So the footsteps are random containers for all the different materials and for the unique footsteps. So we have unique footsteps for Cody and for May, but then we actually share the material-specific footsteps, and that was one of the things that we did. We didn't open the Pandora's box fully. Instead, we used the same content for both of them, but actually used Wwise to just kind of tweak it so that it would match the footstep of each character. So May is a little bit more heel and toe. Cody is a little bit more of a lump and just one impact from the foot. So we actually used the HDR to kind of tame the first transient of Cody's footsteps for these material-specific footsteps, and instead let them through.
One thing to maybe specify for those who maybe haven't played the game is that Cody is actually made of clay, while May is made of wood, so really different. So there was no way we could use the same footsteps for both of them.
No, exactly. And also, I mean, this was also out of performance, you could say. We didn't want to have insane amounts of footsteps read into memory and so on. So yeah, but we have a lot of materials, as you can see, because this game is full of playful materials, like, I don't know, bean bags and mattresses and pillows and ice and glass of different kinds and metal of different kinds as well. So a lot of different things. We also use these material footstep materials also for the hands, actually, but just lowered, maybe higher pitch and so on. So we use them for a lot of different things.
And I don't want to say that I judge a game by its footstep and movement sounds, but I do. And
it's very important.
And it's stunning the amount of diversity that you get while still having consistency. And I think that that's it, right? You have a diverse amount of materials. They all sound materially appropriate, like you were saying, between the characters as well as across surfaces. And I mean, it's a gift to be able to see your Wwise project unfold in this area, because footsteps are something that many games have, I think, and to see the level of detail that you went to bring those surfaces to life. Well, it throws me back to the unboxing demo in the community spotlight. It's that kind of level of detail that really keeps people in the experience and really makes the graphics look better a lot of times.
That is always the goal, to make the graphics work and to make them feel and stand out. And we wanted a lot of variations with these footsteps, like especially in terms of materials, so that it would be interesting to walk around, because you do walk around a lot in this game. One thing that I could just mention quickly is that I know that some people do this trickery where you take like the heel and the toe and separate it in Wwise in two different containers. We did not do that. We just made 20 hopefully nice sounding footsteps, and then we played them because you get so much variation anyways. Yeah. So we have 20 footsteps per character, per movement type, per soft or hard material for the unique ones, and then 20 per material. So it becomes like so many footsteps. Yeah. It's impossible to be able to hear the same one twice after each other. So I think that it was definitely enough. But with the random containers and the separate containers for all the materials, Joakim can take a moment to describe the event-based packaging.
Yeah, because like if we look at all these, we have all these random containers for materials, and like Philip just said, we made variations and unique for characters. And like going back to this moment in time where the three of us has just joined Hazelight, and we got to get something into this game. It's been silent for 18 months. It's time for it to make sound. And I think we pushed in the most crude, like horrible sounding footsteps in there. And like, okay, cool. We can trigger footsteps. It was basically just for us to know, like, okay, Wwise integration is fine. Our banks are loading. We can play footsteps. But then we kind of went on from there and actually lived with the idea of like footsteps for a while, because it sparked a lot of other conversations for us. And like, okay, do we have the like master event switch with all surfaces under a switch? And how I think something that was started on early on was like, okay, how will we manage our sound banks? And at this point in time, you guys at Audiokinetic, you hadn't actually pushed out your event-based packaging yet. I think it was very much in the works. But what we started internally at Hazelight was pretty much building our own. We shared a lot of these ideas in that we wanted to get away from having to, manually handle sound banks ourselves. We didn't want to place events and metadata into sound banks. We certainly didn't want to manage loading and unloading of those sound banks. And this came from all these discussions of like, okay, but we need footsteps to be loaded at all times, but we don't need the snow footsteps in the forest level, but we kind of need those other type of things that we use for this shared footstep system, So we ended up in this path of like, okay, one event is one sound bank, and that whole asset is contained in itself, and referencing that asset anywhere in the game will have all of our audio data loaded. So that's what we built for ourselves, and certainly, improved upon throughout the course of this game. But it happened early on for us in our design, and it kind of came from I think a lot of it came from this discussions that started around footsteps and us recognizing that this will be astronomical amounts of assets, and we need to handle it in a good and painless way, pretty much.
And what you describe is the utopian ideal, right? It's that the sounds are there when you need them and nothing but the sounds that you need. And I think this is something that in asset management that we have strived for, trying to move out of this manual sound bank creation. And it's inspiring to have the example of the work that you've done. I'm proud to have event-based packaging as part of our Unreal integration, and we have some exciting plans for that asset management strategy coming up in the next full release of Wwise. And it's something that we want everyone to share that utopian vision of just assets managing themselves in some way based on the needs of the game. So I'm glad that you are able to reach for that and achieve it at this level to give you that granularity of your sounds. Because, with all of those different surfaces, nobody wants to manage a bank for any of that. So smart to invest in that.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. I think we got a lot. Like, it's not just about the convenience of having this be, handled. Like, whenever you want to play a sound, your data is going to be loaded. But it's because as soon as you kind of, as soon as you start doing a bad job at managing your sound banks manually, like, without you noticing, you'll have, a lot of like unused memory everywhere in your game, because like you won't get a blaring error because you didn't unload that sound bank with those weapons that you're no longer using, but like the data will be there without you possibly recognizing it. So it just solves a lot of manual overhead and like human error in that case as well.
We're with you, and we'll keep working to make that accessible for folks using Wwise. So
that sounds good.
Right on.
Yeah, it's super nice. Like, we really never had to think about the sound banks whatsoever. So it was so easy to be a designer as well. Like, you just make your sounds and it works. So that's what you want. You want to focus on the creative stuff.
Cool. Question coming in from the chat. Is there event-based package equivalent for Unity? And what you'll want to look into is our Unity addressables. This is something that we talked about at the Wwise Worldwide Online Expo earlier this year. It was part of our 21.1 release. And so still in a kind of, I would say, experimental form as we do more work coming up in the next full release of Wwise to kind of continue to bring together this idea of automation with your asset pipeline. And so definitely look into Unity addressables out there, IndieWiz, and stay tuned because we're still running with this idea. So thanks for the question. And feel free to drop those into the chat here. We'll weave them dynamically into the flow. And I know we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. So at any time. Let's keep rolling.
Yeah, I think we could possibly go ahead and have a look at how said materials and footsteps and all of these things can function in the game. Yeah,
let's start with the first video.
Great. Video is on its way.
So we'll start by explaining.
I wonder where that annoying book even came from. He said Rose bought him. He doesn't sound like a book she would buy.
Better.
I don't think this is the one we want, I think. Yeah.
Yes, this is the one.
Yeah. There we go.
So what you hear now is the unique footsteps for this specific character, so Cody right now. And we're running on a soft material right now. Sometimes you will hear a hard material as well. So what we did was that in our FISMAT system, we basically told the physical material like what kind of properties it had. So for example, we say like, all right, this is dirt or mud that we're running on right now. Mud is soft, the same with dirt, also soft. So then we pair the unique footstep soft with a material-specific footstep for dirt or mud. And soon you will hear May as well. So now we have a whole new set of footsteps here. And as she will transition to the rock here, you will hear the hard. So at this point, we're only listening to the to one mono file basically being played. So if you think that it sounds pretty thin and not so interesting, that's what it should be basically, because we have no layers whatsoever. But we wanted to start here so that we would basically build up towards the full movement sound. So yeah, as I said, hard and soft per movement type per character. So we can actually go to the next one, which is this one. So here you're starting to hear the material as well. And now we're on a carpet. And then we move on to the wooden floor. No, we don't. But now we actually, yeah, exactly. Now we pair the character-specific footstep with a material footstep. And the same here. One thing that I could mention as well is that we actually didn't play the footsteps with random containers, the character-specific footsteps. We played them with sequence containers because I wanted it to be a difference between the left and the right foot.
And what do you mean when you say that? Difference between the left and right foot?
So if I would play it with a random container, we could get tam tum tam 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 tum tum tam 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 tum tum tam tum tam 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 tam. But if we play with a sequence container, we always get either right or left. So it's tum tam tum tam tum tam tum tam tum tam tum tam, and that sounded much better. Oh yeah.
It's the little things that become the big things, right?
Exactly. Here you hear some glass stuff. So again, with the character footstep and then the glass added. Yeah, I think we can move on to the next video. So then something that we haven't spoken about at all, we can actually pause it if you can. Yeah, thanks. So we also had another layer to the footsteps that we added on. So when I was recording the Foley with a Swedish Foley artist, Patrik Strömdahl, we went to a church and to another like smaller kind of space and recorded the footsteps on hard and soft material as well. So we basically have a reflective additive layer to these footsteps that we play. So we have small, indoor small and indoor large for hard and soft surfaces. So now we can play the video. So now we're on a hard surface, but in a small space. Or maybe the opposite.
So I think I was just going to say, like, I think it's worth emphasizing there as well. That's just purely baked content. There's no in-game reverb or anything there.
And I think that you can notice the difference as well between May and Cody. We used exactly the same content, but we just remove a little bit of the attack from Cody's footstep.
And you were saying that was a HDR operation, or was that a source editor modification?
HDR, or not HDR, ADR, ADSR.
Ah, gotcha.
So per container, basically, Cody had a slight remove of attack. So since May has a harder foot and he has more of a softer foot, we just remove a little bit of the attack to just give it a little bit of a different flavor.
Gotcha.
And we also pitch them differently. So May's footsteps are pitched up a little bit, the shared elements, and the Cody's a little bit down.
And that's using modulators in the RTPC for the foot switches.
Yeah, so we modulate the pitch and the makeup gain and quite a lot, actually.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Wow. And awesome to be able to just point to it.
Oh, yeah.
Nice work. Cool. What a great technique, again, to shave off that transient a little bit, reuse the content while still making it sound different and unique.
Yeah.
Cool trick.
Yeah, that's the way. So we could go on to the next one. Then we will actually listen to the loops. So the stuff that you've heard now is only basically played with the animation notifies for the footsteps, one-shot things. Now we're actually listening to the, this video, exactly. So these are loops that we play per character and per movement type. And I feel like this is really where you get the flavor of the character, or like what is unique for May's body and what is unique for Cody's.
And this is the movement layer only.
Yeah. And something that we did with these as well was that we actually put markers in the loop so that we could trigger them from a good position so that we would get the sync with the arms. So we basically randomized the seek to a specific marker so that when the file starts playing, it will sync up with their body movement.
And also to kind of have it start from a different position each time. So like if you stop movement, it doesn't always start from the start of the loop there. So it kind of always comes in at a new place.
Incredible precision. Nice. Yeah, the amount of detail in these different aspects, right, on their own is an incredible achievement. And of course, when you combine these all into that final, result, it's that immersion and realism that it brings to it. Really nice.
Yeah. We thought so the next video here, we actually show pretty much all the layers from the movement. So now you can also hear the rustling leaves and so on. So this is basically what, when combining, as Damien said, all of these elements into one thing, then it starts sounding like this.
And I think that you mentioned leaves just a second ago. So are you doing some level of detection then when a character traverses through a grouping of leaves there, and the material changes for that movement type at that time.
Yeah, so we actually don't change the footstep material unless you would walk on like grass or something. But what we do is that we add one shot and a loop for the rustling of the bushes. And we had, I think, 3 or 4 different types, because you see that there is a little bit of difference in the vegetation. So some smaller leaves, some grass, some larger leaves, and so on.
Right, and those are tied to a, I don't know, like a in-game trigger physics detection, or is it animation on the leaves parting? Like, how's that tied in?
It's super manual, which we will never, ever do again, in my life. It's 2021, soon 2022. So what we did was that we actually drew boxes, volumes, where we wanted to. And we had player triggers, basically. So if you walk into it, we just measure the velocity of the character, pitch them, volume, so on. But it was super manual for this game, which was not very nice. But we had some, I think we added that like the 2 last weeks before we shipped the game. Yeah. So it was like really to add that polish to it.
Yeah, like, otherwise it wouldn't have happened, right? It's the kind of thing you do where it's like, okay, we actually find ourselves with some time. What's something that we could possibly do that's safe? Yeah. But that can kind of just like give us a little bit more fidelity here and here, and like Philip says, it's like a dumb system almost. But sometimes like something, sometimes it just works, right?
Yeah, we did the same for the water volumes as well. It was also just a volume, and the thing was that we didn't really have like places where you could walk in water puddles and so on in that many places. So it was all right, we could do it, but it was not nice.
Well, when you reach for that extra level of detail, right, sometimes you don't have the automation that you would hope for a system like that. But I think that, anything that results in that level of detail and fidelity for the sound, hopefully it wasn't too painful, because honestly, it really communicates something about the environment, and it's just a great touch. Nice.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that's you said before, Damien, that it's very important with this, like, as an audio team, communicating to the rest of the studio as well, that we can make these your art, for example, much more beautiful if we just get a system for playing these vegetation sounds. And that was maybe one place where we missed out on that. We actually had the audio system for this probably 1 year before shipping. We had even made the sounds, actually. It was just about making them play in the level, and that we never got to, basically. So that is extremely important. Like, we can do so much cool stuff with audio and really enhance the levels, but we also need perhaps some help from other departments to be able to do it. And this was, just one place where we failed a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, it's that cross-discipline communication, right? And audio oftentimes in a position to have those interactions, in this case was some kind of dynamic physics, that would react to the character moving through these things. In other places, it's audio's overlap with VFX or animation, and so it's across all these disciplines that you have this connective tissue. And so you often find yourself in audio, having to be an advocate for that opportunity, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that's something that gets a little bit harder and harder, especially with VFX and now with many things being on the GPU. And that was the case with these things. Like, we don't have it on the CPU. We don't know when these things rustle. Even though, but we can see it on screen, they are rustling. Why can't we get this information? So that's something that's pretty tricky. But I know that a lot of audio people are looking into and working heavily to basically bridge that GPU information to the CPU and so on.
Yeah.
So that's the future.
We'll get there.
For us.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Cool. Great to hear. We got a question coming in from the chat. It's a little bit out of time with the presentation, but I'm going to drop it here, and maybe we need to circle back to it, but I'll put it out there. The question is, and maybe spoilers for folks, but
Cover your ears.
by now, come on. You've done a lot of talking about it. The question is, how did the idea to destroy audio hardware come across in setting the stage section of the attic? Were you okay with breaking all of the amps and circuit boards?
Yeah,
He also says that it's his grandfather's jukebox, right?
Yeah.
So, and like he would take great care of it, right? And then this scene afterwards, he's just destroying it, burning it down to the ground. So
it's harsh.
That's okay. So
yeah, and we drop a guitar at one place as well. It makes this gnarly noise. It's just it's a bit of tough love.
We will actually see a little bit of gameplay from that level, so maybe we can get back to it.
Okay, great.
Yeah. It's a fun question. Keep them coming.
All right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's time to go back into our Wwise project, is it?
Yes, it is.
What you want to do, Anso?
Yeah, we're gonna, well, now that we have looked a little bit at the characters, movements, footsteps, and all that side of things, we can look a little bit further into the hierarchy and scroll down to the world area.
Eventually, if I don't decide to disable like a hierarchy of like a gazillion work units, so we'll get there soon.
Yeah. Well, anyway, soon you will have an insight into our hierarchy and how it's been divided a little bit further down. And the idea was that, okay, we have a bunch of subcategories there for things that potentially are shared, or character sounds, player sounds, abilities, weapons, things like that. But further down, the idea with the world sort of subcategory is to put in there everything that belongs to the world. Why is this crashing? Oh, great.
Just keep talking. We'll be right back.
All right.
Almost go on.
We're doing this.
And so then we realized pretty early on with It Takes Two that the content was going to be very varied. So it's not exactly a kind of, I don't know, sandbox open world game where you have like the same kind of interactions all over the place, where you could group all them together. It was more like, okay, this is one level and this is kind of a game in itself, and it has all unique things, all unique interactions. And the next level is also all unique. So it kind of made sense to group that together. Even sometimes per sub-level, this is a unique game in itself. So we have the world, and then we have under that every level, and then every sub-level, and every one of them has their own dedicated section for the ambiences for that level or sub-level, the interactions or interactables, so everything that the player is interacting with, all the platforms that are specific to this world, and all the destructibles, sometimes not, and then also events that we have. Events, we call them events, is basically all the scripted events, stuff that happens like on a trigger in game that is, it's not a cutscene, but it kind of happens a little bit like a movie. It's sound design like a movie, like a one-shot thing. We put it in there that's specific to that sub-level. And so it kind of made sense in that way that everything is unique. It kind of made sense also in a workflow perspective that, as we mentioned before, we work per level. So then we're not, all across the Wwise hierarchy to look for an interactable in a list of 100 of them, and then further down, some work units down, another like platform where there's hundreds of them. It's more like, okay, now I'm in this level, and I know I'm gonna find everything I need within that section. So it made sense in that way.
Yeah, like mixing it helped a lot, because we knew that we were in this place and it was a platform that was moving. All right, let's go to the platforms in that level, and it was super easy.
Yeah. If we can jump to the ShareSets and take a look at the shared attenuations, this is a bit of the opposite mindset where we have everything divided because it's unique in the world stuff. Here in the attenuations, we tried to actually do the opposite and share as much as possible. Basically, because there's so much unique stuff in this game, we had to think about, okay, where can we actually share stuff and make the most of that. And here, when we started, we kind of started with sharing for interactables, sharing for platforms, and do all that stuff. But we quickly realized, okay, there's so many of them that are nearly identical. Let's share it more in terms of like, okay, distance and type of object. So is it a large thing? Then we kind of want it to sound bigger further. Is it a small thing, or we want to have it like sound loud enough very close and then attenuate kind of quickly, and these kind of distinctions. But then we share that across the whole game. With, of course, It Takes Two being what it is, we have also some very specific custom attenuation, but we try to stay away from that as much as possible and use the ShareSets there.
And as you're designing, then you're just reaching for the right attenuation to fit based on what is in your shared folder already.
Yeah, exactly. You can just pick and choose, and you quickly fall into like standards. And okay, this is like all of my interactables are pretty much on the 4001, medium kind of thing, and I know that. And so if I want to change something and I think it makes sense to change it for all of them, I will just tweak a little bit, the EQ, will tweak a little bit the reverb on distance, and I know that it will spread across all of them.
Nice.
And most of the time that makes sense.
Yeah. And did you do a lot of custom overrides with attenuations, or did you leverage ShareSets entirely in order to have that kind of clarity?
Yeah, one thing that we just hated seeing was opening up an attenuation and seeing that custom. It was like no. This is no. I mean, it's useful to just test something, but do not leave it there, because then it spirals out of control so quickly when you have so many sounds, and then you can't even locate it, because if you look for the attenuation you will never find it because it's a custom one. So if you really need a custom attenuation, at least go and create it as a share set and use that. I think leaving a custom attenuation. I
think there's a best practice in there, and I think that's why I was trying to surface it, is that really there's a huge value in leveraging share sets across your project, because you get that ability to find your references. You get the ability to understand where things are used and to optimize, to keep things consistent across your project. So thanks for expanding on that.
Yeah, I know that for a fact that we didn't have a single custom one in the project, because we looked with queries and made sure that there was none.
Yeah, there were some popping up once in a while. I was like, no, need to clean it up again.
Nice.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
And the queries are amazing. We use that a lot, actually. As you see, we have a lot of them.
Quite a lot, yeah. Very useful.
Super
All
nice.
Right. Great. And for folks who maybe are not familiar with queries, right? You can, in the query editor, create queries to find different properties or aspects of objects in your project. We've recently added the ability to use the Wwise authoring query language as part of your queries as well. So we have a new robust query language that can be used in the query editor as well. And yeah, it's just like you said, a lot of power to bring things there. Yeah. And you get those configurable columns at the top too, to be able to add properties to it, so you can use it as a multi-editor as well.
Yeah, that was kind of what we did. For example, say just streaming. All right, search for all the sounds of this type of category and change the streaming on all of them.
Yeah.
And that made it so much easier.
Yeah.
Another thing that I could maybe add on, like you saw in the world hierarchy as well, we have a lot of work units. I feel like maybe more than other projects, but that was also because we all worked on the same level at the same time, so we needed them.
It just makes source control easier. It makes working across team members easier. And when you're all creatively in the mix with each other, having things compartmentalized in that way, like you said, it sounds like it made your lives easier.
Yeah, it really did.
And it becomes easy to figure out that you have 32,900 sound effects objects in your project.
Yeah. We had to do that one just to be able to brag. How many sounds did we make?
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's great.
So, Anso, do you want to go in and talk a little bit about ambiences?
Yeah, let's open it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Ambiences were something that we started with since it plays the role in terms of within the soundscape of like the sort of foundation, right? I'm not trying to argue that it's the most important thing. That's the whole other debate. But it's kind of a foundation, sort of background sounds of like, what will kind of start to define how your game sounds. And especially for us in the split screen was like, okay, how are our ambience going to sound? How are we going to manage this with two screens, 2 players? And just so you know, we already did a lot of presentations on that topic, so you feel free to go and look it up because we spoke about this in much more details. The GDC presentation, which I think is available on YouTube now. Yes. And we were also doing a presentation at Develop Brighton this year. So in both of these presentations, we spoke about the ambiences and how we treat that whole split screen thing. But I'm going to go into it a little bit here. So to put it really simply, every ambience, well, it's a zone-based system, first of all. So within the game, within Unreal, we have ambient zones where we decide in each zone what ambience is going to play, what reverb is going to be, and what environment type it's going to be. So we can go a little bit more into that later when we start talking about worldizing and reverb and such. But for the ambiences, basically the ambience is made up of a quad sound, so one looping 4-channel wave file, and we're trying to make our lives easier and simpler by trying to make that quad as rich and detailed as possible to start with, kind of with the idea that the quad could be 100% of the ambience. We have, of course, a little bit more going on. We have random spot sounds being generated. We have a few also kind of manually placed spot sounds within the world, and of course all the rest of the sort of world sounds are making up the ambience too. But the quad really is the foundation and should be pretty much in every single place in the game. There is one place where we didn't put any quad actually.
Digital silence.
Digital silence on purpose. I can maybe talk about it since we started it now.
Calm down.
For those of you who have played, is when you jump into the kaleidoscope, we called it the void world. So it's pretty much a void world, and it's pretty funky with all those colors and moving tiles, and it's pretty like dreamy. And so we kind of went crazy instead with delays and reverbs and all of those funky kind of interactable and platform sounds instead of putting an ambience there. And so when the characters say or do something, it sounds, there's a long reverb, and then if you actually stop, it's going to be dead silent. Yeah, moving on.
I love that
so
technique.
Yeah. So the quads, so basically, to put it really simply, the zones that I was talking about in the game, they will know which player is in the zone. So is it 1 player? Is it 2 players? Is it the left player or the right player? And based on that, we have an RTPC, ambient zone panning. If it's May, who's on the left side, we pan her ambience a little bit to the left, not very drastically, as you can see. It's equivalent to about 6 dB. Same thing on the right if it's Cody. And obviously, if they are both in the same zone, then we don't pan it. We leave it to play as is, as in the quad channels. And of course, we also don't play 2 ambiences. Then we play just the 1 quad for both of them. We only play 2 quads if they're in 2 separate zones.
Cool. So the ambience just kind of slightly moves to the side when they're unique, and when they're the same, you just get the quad for that environment that both characters are in.
Exactly.
Nice.
And it's the idea with that is really kind of the foundation for the whole split screen vision that we've had, is to establish an ownership of the sounds for each player and for each part of their screen, so that we do get everything, but everything is not playing, dead center and in all the same channels.
Yeah.
We tried actually to see how it would sound, and it's it's just a bit messier. So we were like, okay, how are we going to make it work? And obviously making it fully panned, that's a little bit weird too, because then it's like you hear all of the ambience, only on the left side. Is kind of didn't work so much better. But we spoke a little bit earlier about also the character sounds being a pan on each side, and it follows the same logic. May's always going to be a little bit on the left side and Cody on the right side. And then all of that is adaptable to the camera perspective. And are we actually split screen, or are we side scroller, or are we full screen, and all that affects it. But the basis there is ownership on each side.
Yeah, and
I think ownership. Sorry, Evan. I think ownership is an interesting word there, because like we see here, like it's the easiest thing in the world. It's like an RTPC that slightly pans something. But like I will go as far to say it, like I think it is like the foundation of the mix of the game, almost, in that like we can use it for the quads, we can use it for all the character sounds, but then also like when a specific character interacts with an object, then we take that all the sounds for that object and kind of impose that ownership of it. Like, okay, we have this vehicle that either player can get into at any one time, and when one player does, then that vehicle sounds are now, they belong to that character's adventure, their experience, and it already we can take all of these things that happen all the time and kind of give them their like at least base position on the screen, right?
Yeah,
that makes a ton of sense.
It's about like scooping out as well, like removing the stuff that would get overlapped and push it to there and to there, so that we get a cleaner mix and understand what we're listening to.
Yeah, and when your consideration is both couch co-op, sitting in front of a television, you want to have that kind of that ownership, and you recognize this could be a networked situation. You could have a person in each home with headphones, and so you don't want to break that by going so discreet with your channels in your panning. But again, I think this subtlety of pushing things, giving things space, carving out that opportunity to present that ownership, really worked out great for me in my playing. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good. So I think we can listen to the video,
Great.
the next video.
Yes.
So we have basically tried to show that into a video, and we've soloed the ambiences. And here we have two different ambiences. The two players here start in the same place, and one of them will jump underwater. And try and pay attention. Obviously, the ambiences are not the loudest sounds, but it's about trying to hear how they're a little bit more on each side. And then when the two players are sort of reunited in the same environment, so when both jump underwater, you hear the underwater ambience in all quad channels in equal volume everywhere. You can play.
You can enjoy the idly animations as well.
We're both going underwater now. So now you know what to listen for. We've heard the sort of cave above water ambience. Now we're hearing the underwater ambience. And then one player is gonna come out, and hopefully you can hear that both ambiences are playing.
There you go.
Nice.
Yep.
I think that shows it pretty good.
Subtle.
We could actually show the next video straight away, because there we have done a capture for an earlier presentation.
Yeah, trying to emphasize it with the same idea. It's like the without panning versus with panning.
Perfect.
Hopefully you can hear.
Yeah, it sounded great. Nice. Are we ready for this one? Or are we doing some setup?
Ooh, I don't know. Are we?
Yeah, we are. We are.
Yeah, I can. Before we play the video, I can just like quickly talk about why this video exists, I guess. And like with how easy this RTPC was that we just talked about, it just like it kind of just works. It's just like an RTPC slightly panning something, and it does really what you expect it to do. That works great for all of our non-spatial sounds, right? But we very early on with this game realized that we were in for a treat with, you know, we had our two listeners. Obviously, we haven't really touched upon that subject, but I'm sure everyone can have guessed that already. Like Cody and May, they each have their own listener. And when both of their listeners are actively mixing and listening to the same spatialized object, then we kind of have a duplicate signal, right? And that gave us a lot of problems in mixing for our spatial sounds, because the amplitude would change when both of these listeners were listening to them at the same time. The positioning would be all over the place, and both of these things are a fact because of how these two listeners were combined. The accumulative output would be a combination of the audio signal found in like a combination of all of the listener channels, right? So that was something that we could instantly tell when we started working on this game. Like, okay, so this is what we're in for, and we're gonna have to handle it in some way. And this video that we now can play showcases how we ended up handling it with some changes to how we calculate combined spatialization in multiple listeners, really. So I think we're ready to bring up the video and have a listen. And what you'll hear is, you know, we have this very obvious sound source, right? The wall of lasers, and we can go ahead and play it.
Great.
And what you'll hear is, like, obviously both of these characters are listening to the sound of this wall.
And it's also solo listen, just so you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's all that we're listening to right now. And right now we can see that both of these players, they're standing like approximately the same distance from the source with approximately the same angle to the source. And now May is moving away, but the sound doesn't really change in amplitude, right? Because Cody is still the closest listener. He is the closest listener to the source, and so that's the position that we reference for how far away are we from the source. What should the actual amplitude be? Now, as for the panning, that's a different thing, right? We don't want to combine two listener perspectives to create a third one that doesn't really speak the truth of both of them. So now Cody turns away. He did for a second there, and as he moves away, we can see that where like the sound of this thing is still, it doesn't really, like, the positioning hasn't really changed. It's still coming from in front of us, even now as one of the cameras are moving around.
Yeah, and is that engine level implementation,
Yeah.
or are you using spread and focus to help modulate that, or?
No, everything about this system was changed in the Wwise source code. So we kind of hacked open like the deep down in Wwise when the spatialized output for the mixing node is calculated.
Gotcha.
So we can hopefully hear now as the cameras start to move about how the positioning of this sound might change in your soundscape.
I think it will come now.
Yeah. So pay attention now and try to listen what happens as the cameras start to turn around. So still, the position is still the same, even though like Cody's back is turned, the position is the same, right? The amplitude changes when the closest player moves away or closer. So the closest player denotes attenuation amplitude.
Nice.
But what we wouldn't want there, like if Cody now moves closer, we don't want the amplitude to go up even higher. We don't want like a full 6 decibels of increased output.
Yeah, so it's a
Now
prioritization on the closest listener, and
for amplitude, yes.
Yep.
And then for position, we can see that May has turned away. She's the closest player, but Cody is still looking straight at this thing, so we still keep it in focus. And that's the gist of it. Closest listener denotes amplitude, and closest listener angle in forward direction to that sound. Basically, which listener is most looking at this sound. That denotes speaker placement. So now Cody starts turning away from this as well. And you can hear what happens. So that's what we did. We decoupled attenuation amplitude from the panning of it, the spatialization.
Yeah.
So because what we didn't want, like we didn't want a sound source to be represented from a perspective of a player who wasn't looking at it, a player who probably wasn't caring about that sound at all.
And one thing that we could add as well is if you would be listening in surround right now, it would be super apparent, because if May is standing really close, looking away from the sound, it would sound very loud in the rear speakers. And for Cody's perspective, this would not add up because he's just looking straight at it. So that was basically what we tried to solve.
Yeah, we wanted to get away from that because we couldn't mix with the standard implementation, because there was no the result of what we would hear was never deterministic. It was always a combination of these two listener perspectives, and it would be like vary ever so slightly based on how one of these listeners turned, and the final combined output was something that we couldn't control. And in this way we can, and we can say that, okay, however close the closest listener is, that's how loud this thing is, and then we can kind of reward or perform this sound for the player that is currently interested in this sound by looking at it, and accurately place that sound based on what that player would expect to how that player would expect to experience that sound.
Yeah, well, and I love this. Again, I could rename this entire live stream to, you know, the level of detail that it takes to create, you know, immersion in an interactive environment, right? Because you really have taken it all the way there to preserving that sense of spatial presence for both players with agency. And it's these kind of solutions that, yeah, they really help keep you in the experience. There's a question coming in from the chat about listener position as well, and that's the question of do you have an opinion on attaching emitters to each foot to create slight stereo variations? Again, might not be 100% applicable in the split screen, but was that something you ever experimented with trying to get a kind of stereo representation in those kind of situations?
So I could probably take that one. So one thing first that I can start with is that we have only mixed this as a 5.1 channel-based format, so no spatial 3D object stuff going on. If I would make a game that is maybe first person or something, maybe even a VR game, then I would for sure try to do this. But we are always quite far away from the character, so for me it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make any difference at all, actually, in our game. And even if we've been talking a lot about like panning and putting things all over the place, and now with the 3D sounds, we actually kept as many sounds as possible non-spatial, because as soon as you start panning things around with the two listeners, it becomes messy. This like Haze 3D panning kind of system that we made, it helps a lot. It works very well when playing the game together, and you get this ownership, and you get the prioritization of the sound that you're listening to. But as many as possible of the sounds that we made are actually non-spatial, so that we just keep them where they belong.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. In a first-person game, or even in a third-person game that transitions to, let's say, more of a cinematic camera perspective. The traditional example is, you know, I've got a third-person action game. I'm running around. My footsteps are, you know, there. But then you get the cinematic camera pans right up to the ladder that you're about to climb, and now you have that left and right stereo separation of footsteps. Again, probably in a third to first person transition that might make more sense, whereas most of the time in this game you have those two perspectives that you need to bring together, and the solution, the Haze 3D panning you just showed, really threads that in a immersive way that keeps people in it. So
yeah, and then it's also a matter of like a choice actually in your mix. If you want the movement and stuff to feel very wide and like large, or if you want to keep it quite sort of point source to have space for other sounds. So it's definitely a choice that the designer has to make as well. Like, okay, so what is most important in this part, and do I need to have a lot of space in this mix for like bigger sounds as well? If you don't have that, then maybe you want to have it spread. But if you want it to be small, like our characters, very small in a very, very large world, we wanted them to be quite tiny, and then to have the space to really like punch you in the face with massive walls of sound with other things instead.
Totally. On that same topic, there's a question about kind of throwing it back to the underwater side of things. The question coming in is, May and Cody's voice while they're underwater doesn't have the same muffle effect you might expect from a film, which makes sense from a clarity perspective, but did you do any experimenting to try to add EQ or some kind of crazy chorusing while underwater?
Yeah, we did. One thing that we can mention as well is that all of those water sounds are actually recorded by us three. We went outside Joakim's house in February in super cold Sweden. I had a scuba diving suit, and I went below freezing water, and just we recorded all kinds of bubbles, which was super fun. So I actually used a few of those like clean bubbles as an IR to make some sort of underwater feeling. The balance always, of course, with the underwater stuff is like, okay, should first of all, should the characters even speak underwater? In our game, we wanted them to do that because they are tiny magical creatures or dolls. So that felt like, we're not breaking any sort of realism here. But we still wanted to affect it with something. So there is some high frequency cut when you go below water. But most, like, not so drastic. We still wanted to hear what they say and so on. So it was a little bit of a balance back and forth. And then adding a lot of this weird IR reverb.
And you use that underwater. You use that with the Wwise Convolution as an IR?
Yeah.
And I love hearing about creative use of convolution outside of just environmental reverb. So thank you for that. It's such a useful tool when you push outside the boundaries of what's expected. So nice.
And then it's we actually added also a little bit. We track the amplitude of the voice and add a little bit of bubbling from their mouths. But it's quite subtle, and it's quite hard to hear because, of course, the underwater is bubbling all the time anyway. So it's like kind of, I don't know, if you would have the Wwise project of solo listen, you would hear it, but it's not much more than that.
And I remember all these things, like the convolution for the underwater VO, the filtering we did. Like, it was a lot more prominent when we first implemented it, and we're like, okay, it sounds really cool, right? But we still need to hear clearly all of these voice lines that the characters have here. The narrative can't fall apart just because we're having really fun with our audio. So we kind of really dialed it back to a place where I still feel like it's, it's there, and it definitely breaks the pace of how the VO sounds in other places. But we still need to fall on the side of making sure that clarity and like what they're actually saying in their voice lines comes through.
And we didn't want to leave it like unaffected either, or just with a simple high cut. I don't like that at all, actually, personally. So it needed to have some sort of effect, but it's quite subtle still.
Yeah, you couldn't go full Bane from Batman.
No,
no, exactly.
People for the effect. Yeah, it's
exactly
nice.
We didn't want to do that.
Great. Well, thanks for those extra questions. The last one I'll tack on before jumping back in. Question. What source control did you use, or what source control is used by Hazelight internally?
All of them.
Okay. Good enough.
No, but all of the content creators, so designers, so that's certainly Philip and Anne-Sophie and the rest of the audio team. All of that content is in Perforce, which you may or may not heard of. So that's a centralized source control model. But all of our code, pretty much, is in Git. So a combination of both. So for me, that means like every single thing that I'm pushing throughout the studio, I'm constantly like, okay, is this thing in Perforce? Git? What do I need to do? But as long as you use something, doesn't really matter, right? Whatever fits your needs.
Cool. And dovetailing back into the Haze 3D panning, what was the collaboration like on the development side? Like, was this a feature that you had to work with the team at Hazelight to pull off? Was this something that you were able to implement by tearing apart the Wwise source code? Like, how did you have to convince people that this was a valuable feature to add?
No, we just didn't tell people that we were going to do it, and then we did it.
Could say that. I guess at least like it really started from a creative, you know, like we listened to the game and it was like, this is a big problem.
Yeah.
And we lived with this problem for a long time.
Got it.
We fixed it quite late actually.
Yeah.
But then we fixed it by ourselves. Yeah. But I could just bring that up actually, that even in the studio and like, people overall, like there is a slight misunderstanding of what you're able to do in split screen. Like, for example, say a single player game, you can have, these attractor sounds like in the level. All right, I'm heading over there, you play some music or something. We can't really do that. And we had actually one place in a level where we had some music playing in the world from a place where you need to go. And that was, of course, done by a designer, you could say, like that choice at least. But we told this person, like, we can't really do that. Like, we cannot never get it pinpointed, like, okay, this is exactly where the sound is, because we have the combination of the two. But what we did a lot instead was like, after a while, with this direction of the camera or where the player are looking, and also we utilized a lot of azimuth. To kind of, fake it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, should we jump back into some more 3D panning?
Yeah, there's another video of showcasing Haze 3D panning that we could have a listen to if you guys would just want to have a listen without me blaring over it. Otherwise, we could move on to some other stuff.
Let's go with.
You feel like
let's roll a little bit more video, and
there's another video after this. We could just play a little out of this. So same concept here. We're showcasing how our Haze 3D panning lives and breathes.
Is this the void?
This is
Yes.
This is like what I listen to on the walk to work.
I imagine.
You of course have just one sound source solo, so it's not actually that silent.
Right.
So at least as you saw, like when the players are looking at the object, it's coming from the left, center, right speaker. When both are looking away. Oh yeah.
We need to pause this video. We'll come back to this in a second, I think. But Philip.
Yeah.
How about we crack open the bus hierarchy?
Let's do it.
So let's jump back into authoring.
All right.
So we looked at the actor mixers, world, footsteps, whatnot. Let's now look at the buses instead. And something that you quickly see here is that we have an HDR bus and we have some other buses, one of them being a non-HDR bus. Wait up. Our internet hupshed a little bit. So we have some non-HDR sounds, basically sounds that are not going through the HDR. VO, player movement. We never wanted to duck the player movement because we wanted a solid sort of sound point to hang on to. The same with music and cutscenes, of course. But most of the other things actually go through the HDR bus. And let's see, should we go through that? We will actually show the voice monitor later a little bit to see how the HDR is actually working. But I can just go through like what type of sounds we have in the HDR bus. So of course the ambiences, the world sounds, those are the ones that we want to duck away so that we can create space for other things. We have all the gameplay sounds. Those are mostly the ones that are pretty loud. And will duck other more silent sounds. You see there that we have some special buses for the center speaker as well, which is a little bit of a workaround because we can't use the Wwise center percentage if we have things that are statically panned and using the balance fade. So we needed to create a bus so that we could center the center speaker because we wanted to do that. And then we have some characters like bosses and so on. So not the character movement sounds, but the bosses and the enemies and whatnot. And since Damien actually asked before this about our speaker types and the mix for those, we shipped It Takes Two in 5.1 channel based. You can also play it in stereo, of course. So what we do is basically we're using a Wwise down mix, but we're actually tweaking it a little bit with some RTPCs so that we can have the center speaker not be lowered with 3 dB because we wanted it to be there in the stereo as well. And then we have headphones, TV, and large speakers as our speaker types. And something that we did, if you hide the HDR stuff there so that we just look at the bass buses, basically. We have one bus that is called parallel compression and one that is called low frequency enhancement. And those two we only enable when you're playing through TV speakers. So what we do with the low frequency enhancer is that we're basically EQing out all the high frequencies in the entire game, only the low frequencies, and then we distort them quite heavily actually to create some harmonic overtones so that when you're playing in a TV, you still get those harmonics of the sub bass so that you would not feel like the game is lacking those. And this was quite a lot of back and forth for myself when I set this up. Like how much to add. It was very easy to add way too much. Yeah. But yeah, this was something that we wanted to try. So basically like kind of trying to recreate the max bass plugin from Wwise, or Waves, I meant, something else. So yeah, creating overtones from the bass.
Cool.
And then for the parallel compression, we also there send pretty much all the sounds in the game to a pretty hard distortion and compressor to then mix a little bit of that in so that we basically decrease the dynamic range of the mix for TV. And yeah, that's about it actually.
Well, and when you say that's about it, I mean, again, like... These are the things that that you do to add a level of detail to the player experience across these different listening environments. And these techniques are really powerful, like you said. It brings back some of that character, right? That might be lost in a different listening environment, or in the kind of night mode, you know, reduced dynamic range scenario, you know, being able to continue to, you know, bring the full spectrum and make sure that all those frequencies are represented. Guitar distortion on the mix, bring it. Cool.
Exactly.
Nice technique.
I think we even had some rectifier, so it was really the Metallica distortion.
All right, well, it's probably not Black Album level brick walled or anything, but
no, not really.
But you know, it's good to bring that technique again to fill out those frequencies and make sure they're represented under the different listening environments. Yeah, when I played, you know, as a audio designer, it's one of the first things I look for. I hit the menu of a game and I'm like, okay, what are the audio settings? And I think that we've really expanded on the language of what we present to people as their options when listening. I think there's still some work to do to communicate what those things actually mean, like to the common player, let's say. But I think that having those options, letting them judge for themselves and make those decisions, I think that's a powerful thing as a developer to enable for people. So it's
quite hard to define them for like normal players. I remember that Joakim actually wrote some of these descriptions, and we had to cut them down because they wrote too much text, so they didn't fit in the menu. So that was actually a limitation.
Like, you know, for us to talk about it, what it is, it's like super clear, right? But then I'm like sitting down to write these like descriptions for, okay, what does this slider actually do for you? And like sitting there like, okay, describe it in one sentence so my mom understands it. And it's like it's super difficult suddenly. Like these concepts are not so crystal clear, right?
No.
So there's definitely work to be done there.
Did I mention the Wwise documentation? You know, it's we get it.
We should just have a hot link there so people can just press it in their game, and then it just opens up right for reference.
Right.
Right.
Great.
So I guess Anne-Sophie, you can go into the reverbs a little bit because we have some stuff going on there too.
We have some stuff going on, yeah, definitely.
Boom.
So here we have all of our convolution reverb buses. So okay, what can we say first? We want to say that, the idea behind using convolution reverb is that for It Takes Two, for us, we knew pretty early on that immersion, believability, convincing, are all going to be things that were going to be super important. Not only because I think we're all believers of like bringing that forth into game audio and like making an immersive world and it becomes a pleasant experience, but also because of the split screen and like delivering a world that is really convincing is kind of an effort to counteract the split screen a little bit. Like the more you believe in the world, the more you maybe allow the players to forget about the split screen to sort of compensate for that lack of like visual representation in a way. So we kind of threw a lot of effort into worldizing, and one of those aspects was using convolution reverb and being really creative with it. So first of all of the IRs, so all of the impulse response, we recorded and designed ourselves. So we used, for most of them, we used whip cracks. So we did a bit of experimentation, and then Philip actually even went as far as building his own whip because a commercial whip was not good enough.
It also has a name, the White Dragon,
because it's all white. It's very stylish. So all of the reverb in It Takes Two is made with the White Dragon. So very cool, actually. It works really well with a whip. So we recorded IRs all over Stockholm, a few places in the mountains, and everywhere we had a chance. And we used those recordings to kind of design stuff a little bit further and make them really fitting to our spaces. So yeah, but like I would say that 99%, I'm going to even dare say that of our IRs came from the White Dragon plus a little bit of design. And so what we did was to again try and share. Of course, it doesn't make sense to go like so granular that you have one IR per room, but still to get some level of detail there. So we have obviously different kinds of rooms of different sizes, but also is it cold room, cold character, or warm kind of room? We have, of course, different outdoors stuff. Is it a field? Is it a forest? These kind of things. Different tunnels, and it goes a little bit further when we actually needed something really custom, like the kaleidoscope void world, for example. That's a really good example.
And those are like really like just created with various sounds that we put together to make this IR.
We went nuts. Maybe Joakim, you can bring up the waveform representation for the kaleidoscope void world, because you see the delay lines within the IRs. If you can find it.
We have the tower room. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool.
So so you can really hear in the game. I mean, go and play it and listen to the geek out on the IRs and Convolution Reverb.
I love
Here's
it.
the here's for the underwater VO that we talked about earlier. You can see that it has its own little, and it also gets a little love the EQ.
It just looks so boring there.
Yeah, but
it's actually like a bubble
exciting
sound, but it just looks like a sausage of noise.
Nice. And what about convolution size? Did you do some reduction on them? Was there ever concern about concern over size?
We really didn't like think about it too much. Actually,
Great.
I was quite worried in the beginning, but when we stream in and stream out the levels, like we remove the IRs as well. But we did shrink them a little bit, so I think that the plugin actually has some really nice features for that, and it's pretty easy to hear them as well. So lowering a little bit the amount of high frequencies later in the file, basically, because there are usually not that many, not that much data in the high frequencies late in the tail, basically.
Yeah, and you would
We're very
have.
thankful for, I was just gonna say, like 1 year before our release, you guys released a pretty hefty performance improvement to the Convolution plugin, which was much welcomed.
Always making it better, for sure. And so how many simultaneous convolutions would you have? You'd have the environmental, and then maybe a dialogue processing one.
Rarely.
We had we never pretty much had any specifics for VO and sound effects except for underwater. But we did have, like, each player can be in a different zone with a different reverb,
Right.
and then sounds playing outside of that zone will also get a different reverb. So we can have a lot of different reverbs at the same time.
And obviously, each player can be in a sort of transition zone where two are active at the same time. So at least 4 at the same time, perhaps even a fifth if there's another. It can add up.
Like Philip said, you'll definitely have like other spatialized sounds that they're playing in their own zone, a zone that the players are not in, and then get represented from that zone. So
So I actually don't know, like, sort of a worst case, but for sure, like, I guess 5, 6.
I would say 8. I think is what I tracked as worst case, at least. They might be worst cases that I didn't know about, but
And the beauty is, you seem totally chill about that. Like, hey, it's cool. Pile up 8 convolutions, no worries, right? And I think that's part of where we're arriving with the resources we have available, and as you mentioned, the optimizations to Wwise, is that we continue to reach for these creative tools, and we're adding more and more because we recognize the value it brings to the experience. And in the case of dynamic parameterization or side chaining or HDR, like, just your game layers all of these exciting techniques, and yet you're just kind of like, yeah, well, we did it, and it's cool, it's working. And I love that.
We did though try to, like, make most of them not too long either, like in the design process. So we had some limitations on ourselves as well, except for the ones in the void world, because we knew that it was not going to be that many sounds. It's a special case. I think that one is probably like 5 seconds or something, like something ridiculous, which is not okay in most games. But since we knew that it was going to be like in one zone in the game, in one place, it worked.
That's about knowing your budget, knowing where you can push in that direction because you have that. So nice.
I knew that it was like basically footsteps, some other sounds, and this IR. That was everything in that place.
We'll get back to talking to the HDR a little bit soon as well, but like it really helps in that sense also. It's not just a tool to manage the mix of the game, but like when utilized correctly, the HDR is a fantastic optimization tool for the audio thread, because it, like, if you can't hear it, it will be killed and it won't be played and it won't eat into your resources. So it helps tons with that for us as well. So getting this game to run on the Xbox, like Convolution Reverb was never the worst offender, to be honest.
Great to hear.
So I guess we could go into another bus as well that shows some delay. So we have a raycast delay system. So from both players, we trace with 2 different traces, left and right, we built a delay plugin to be able to change the delay time and the feedback time in runtime, so that we could have some earlier reflections for those. So we basically have an environment type system in our game, and we specify which environment type a specific zone is. And then we basically tame the data that we get from the traces a little bit, so that we can have small room can have slightly closer delays, and a large room has further away, and so on. And that is also actually for performance, because we don't trace further than we need delay time, basically. That was something that we did. So I don't know exactly how we made this plugin, but it's nice.
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about that, I guess. It was a very great collaborative process with the design and me and our audio programmer Göran digging into it together and just talking to the team and understanding exactly how we wanted this thing to work. And if we take a look at it, we can go to the HDR bus. No, wait, that's the filtering one. I'm over there. So the Haze Delay plugin is not at all very exciting to look at. This is what it looks like. But it does exactly what we need. And like Philip says, the stock delay plugin that comes with Wwise does not have variable delay time that we can set in runtime via an RTPC. And there's, of course, tons of reasons for that. But we kind of wanted that, or needed that complexity for this thing to work. If we can't change the delay time, then we can't have a delay ray tracing system, right? So that's pretty much what we did. And we built a, what's usually called a fractal delay. So with a variable delay line, and also we can have the feedback to feedback into it as well. So that's really all there is to it. And then the data that is fed to this all comes from the raycast that we do in game. We'll take a look at them. So the delay time is just scaled over what we said. Okay, 2 seconds of that's our longest delay that we're interested in tracing, and then based on the length of the traces, we'll end up somewhere in between here for how long the delay is for that that exact moment. And this is updated constantly every frame, obviously.
Yeah, and like you said, ray tracing, for folks who maybe haven't heard of that technique before, it's the process of basically drawing a line between the listener or player and a surface in geometry to be able to calculate that distance. You update it pretty frequently, and then use that value to drive the delay time and feedback.
Yeah. And we did also use it, so we can actually play the video and we can speak over that one, because you will see some more stuff that we received.
Great, and this the Haze Delay with debug.
Yes, here we go.
Yeah.
You can see what's going on. So the green lines here, that's the actual trace as it's happening.
Yeah. And you see the debug as well. So you see on the May's side now, there is a whole list of different data that we get from the trace. So not only do we get a trace length, but we also know what type of fizz material that the trace hits. So, for example, in this case, we're hitting a wooden wall, which is a slightly absorbent material. So we can also reduce the high frequencies in the reflection. Here we're walking through a narrower place, so the delay time will, of course, be shorter.
And if you notice that when we were in authoring just a second ago, that we have 2 buses per character. So we track left and right channels separately for each player. So that's four delay lines in total. Cody left, May left, Cody right, and May right. So we can have, if the right trace of the character is really long, then that delay coming through your right channel will be really long, while you have a shorter one potentially in the other channel.
And when we started setting up this, basically taming the data, we started from something that is very realistic, like, all right, how far does sound travel over a second and so on. But as you see, our worlds are not very realistic. So in the end, it was about like just listening and taming it so that it sounded good in each environment.
Yeah, it's that intersection of, you know, realism and creativity, or expression.
And as Anne-Sophie said earlier, like we really tried to bring the worldizing of this game quite far. We also have some assets that we play that are like baked tales and so on. But with the IRs, the delay, and those baked tales, it feels like it becomes such a nice glue. Like all of them kind of take care of their own little space of that. And of course, we couldn't like make tales for every single sound in the game. That would not have made sense. But there we use instead the IRs, and then we have some louder sounds where we use tails. So they all have their like kind of category of sounds that they take care of.
I especially love the relationship between the IR reverbs and this, like, the early reflections that we model through this delay system. So that like the quad zones and the reverbs that they play, they have this like really thick, reliable bed of reverb and worldizing characteristics and elements. And then on top of that comes this system, which is like totally based on runtime. It's random each and every frame, and it adds that level of like flavor that's just going to be different like every single frame of the game pretty much. Whereas you can, and that functions and it works well because you have that deterministic system underneath, which is like the IO reverb. So I think they just like they marry each other perfectly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Levels of detail. Again, like you're building these levels of detail that, as Anne-Sophie was mentioning, create the space, give that sense of presence and that immersion. And then you bring in that dynamic element of the delay lines. And in the footstep videos we saw at the start of the presentation, was that toggled on?
Yeah.
Great. So when folks listen back to that, what you're also hearing as part of those footstep and movement layers is also these delay lines in the space. And that was something that I heard as we were listening. It's, but it helps to bring what I'm sure are, I think you had mentioned that there was some amount of reverb baked into those samples as well.
Yeah.
So again, you've got some worldizing as part of the samples. You've got the IR that's giving the space its late reflections. You've got the delay lines giving that positional and material specific information for the area. And this is just the layering of, like you said, maybe the glue, or that, it just brings all those pieces together.
Yeah, and the interactivity as well, since the reverb that we actually like render the files with won't change unless we actually change files. But yeah, we did actually pretty much all of the sounds are rendered with a little bit of reverb, like all the VO, pretty much everything, just to like push it a little bit further into the picture, because that was also something that we really wanted to play with, was like this depth that things actually have, are in the screen and not just, stuck here on your nose, basically. That's something that we tried to do.
Yeah, incredible. We're rounding at the 2-hour mark. Do you have some more in you, or do we want to keep going? Because there's so much here. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I think we can keep going. We're nearing the end of our planned topics, and I think it's two interesting topics, so
Great.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So we can actually play the HDR video that we had. Once this one is going on, I can just talk about this a little bit. So as we said, we use the HDR. You see that we have colored the different categories of sounds with different colors. So I think explosions are the ones that are orange there. Some ambience and some other elements are blue. and some gadgets are like purple or something, and then we have the weapons are yellow. So we're basically like shooting like crazy here and exploding a lot of stuff. And every time that there is an explosion, you see that the HDR window is pushed up, which means that the world sounds will be ducked, and we create space both in the mix but also performance, so that we can play a lot more sounds, but kind of like smoothly make them play or not play without really noticing.
We'll also have 2 instances of the HDR bus active at any time, which you might be able to see there from the shape of that, the blue, the HDR window.
So one thing that we had some issues understanding, I would say, in the beginning was that we kind of thought that we would just have one instance of the HDR, but since we have 2 listeners, we have 2 instances of the HDR. And as we said, with the 3D panning and the summing of these 2 signals, it meant that sounds are louder when both players are listening to them rather than just one listening to them. And that was something that we wanted to reduce. But we actually kept the 2 instances living their own life, because that means that if one player is standing close to an explosion, it will duck the mix less than if both players are close to the explosion. And that felt like quite a nice thing, actually. So we kind of just left it there. Anything else that I should say about the HDR? Yeah, I can just go through a little bit of like tips and tricks.
I mean,
so
again, let me just interject there. Like, hey, we're making this game, we're doing these cool tricks, we're reaching for this technology has a cost, we're aware of this cost, and well, hey, we'll just do it twice. No big, right? So I'm just underlining that because I think that's so important, to think without the restrictions of your resources. Have an awareness, be aware of what the cost of things are, but not feel the limitation of that. And your description just now is like so effortless. You know, I'm sure it came with some, some squinting and some, deep thought. But I think that there's a beautiful nugget there around just, embracing technology and its use and really going for it because it made sense for creative concerns, for your creative vision.
For sure. So. Yeah, I would say that it came with a lot of headaches as well, and a few of learnings that we have that we can share is like normalize your sounds. It will make your life a lot easier because the envelope of the HDR will be handled a little bit easier. Also, it helps a lot to create guides where what type of categories of sounds should have what, or how should I say it? Like categories for the voice volume. So say explosions, maybe 0 or something, depending on what you want. Gadgets -12, weapons -6, ambiences -40. Make those structures early on in your project, and then you can change them. But you at least have a plan so that you don't start just adding things randomly everywhere, and then you have to go back to old levels and just change all of them later, because we had to. And think about it as like, so it is an optimization tool, but it's also a mixing tool, and it doesn't always need to be that the loudest sound need to have the highest HDR value. Now it can also be the most interesting sound or the one that the player wants to hear. So it's not just modulate, like trying to make a model of how the loudness works in our real world and trying to squeeze it into a speaker. It's a creative mixing tool. You just choose how you use it. Like, for example, Overwatch have used this type of mixing with other tools, but like similarly, like what do the player need to hear at this specific moment to do the right choice and so on.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between, historically HDR being seen as the loudest sound is the most important sound, to really the most important sound is the most important sound.
Exactly. That's a super nice way to put it. You choose, basically, what is the most important sound.
Yeah.
And then you can always balance it with the makeup gain if you want it to be lower, but it should scoop a bigger part of the mix out for that specific sound.
Right.
Another, like, 2 more things that we can just say is that if you're working with many different layers, try to have them set on the same voice volume value, because otherwise you will get internal ducking between these layers, which is most often not what you want. And also a last thing is to be aware that if you set the voice volume like too low, you will basically you will know that these sounds will be the ones that will be ducked the first. So you need to set them appropriately so that you don't lose them in the middle of an action sequence or something if you want to hear them.
Yeah, and with that losing, like you say, comes the voice behaviors, right? When
Exactly.
When a voice falls under that threshold, what do you do, right? If it's a looping sound, do you keep it alive? Do you kill it?
Yeah.
You know, you have a lot to negotiate there across your categories of sound, potentially, to ensure that when a voice does return, that it, plays back appropriately. So and
I would also say those like the virtual voice settings, for example, how a sound will be called. Try to set those, like this is at least what I would do, set them as high up in the hierarchy as you can possibly do. Because as we said with the custom attenuations as well, if you start having these things like all over the place in your project, it'll be very hard to manage. But if you say, okay, all the quad ambiences should work like this, all the spots, all the weapons, all the explosions, then you have a much easier time actually fiddling about with those numbers and just towards the end of your project, for example, when you're mixing.
Totally. It's leveraging that hierarchical relationship. It's smart implementation. Nice.
Yeah. So I guess we can just play the next video quickly to just show what we actually played through the HDR when we were looking at the voice monitor window.
Great. Here.
We don't have to play the whole thing, but
all right, here we go.
Just to give you some perspective.
Very busy bus time.
Yeah. So as you see, there is quite a lot of stuff going on here. So the HDR definitely helped us training this.
Get to the other side!
Like I'm hearing the difference in weapon types, of course, across the two players. So I put a pin in that. I want to circle back, but again, with the subtle positioning blend across the left and right.
Yeah, I think maybe we heard enough to get a good idea.
Yeah.
Great. And like two things, like did you have much interaction on the design side of this sequence with getting that differentiation of weapon type? Was that a consideration? Because certainly from a mixed perspective, had you thrown two of the same weapon at the players, that would get confusing fast from a sound perspective. So I'm interested, was there any story there of that conversation?
So actually, it was definitely not an idea that came from us to the designers. The idea behind It Takes Two and the level design, the game design, and the sort of creative direction was, can I say it? Fuck shit up. That's what our creative director kept saying to the designers. So that meant basically bring in new stuff, no repetition, try like new things pretty much every 5 minutes, new gameplay mechanics, new gadgets, new weapons. So if you play across the whole game, Cody and May will never use the same weapons. They will never use the same gadgets, not at least in terms of player abilities. Of course, if it's something you can interact with in the game, then they can each have their turn. But in terms of like what's dedicated to them, it's always going to be different. I mean, for us, it serves us super well, of course.
Yeah.
But it wasn't strictly an idea that came from us. We tried to just make the most of it.
Yeah. And in the cases, like there is one level where you're using a magnet, so both of them actually have a magnet, but you have different polarity. Then we tried to enhance as well that difference. So like who is attracting and who is, what do you call it? Detracting, I was going to say, but
Repelling,
pushing away.
Yeah.
Repelling, yeah. So trying to, that creates like a diverse and interesting mix. But it also helps understanding the game better. So that was for sure something that we wanted to collaborate with the designers.
Yeah, nice touch. And again, I think it helped certainly in the sequence that we were watching to differentiate positionally and kind of understand the mix. Back to what you were saying, kind of spreading out the sound field a bit and giving a little bit more depth and perspective to things. So definitely working in concert. And I think there's so many different places we could look at this game and say that across disciplines, there's just this seamless integration of ideas that all complement each other. So this idea to just, switch up mechanics or switch up, types of interaction over the course of the project, well, you leveraged that and worked with it and supported that in the best possible way. It really turned out great. I'll come back to this screenshot because, again, we're in a split screen scenario. We've got player left, player right. This is most of the gameplay. And what we've touched on a couple times here are the moments when we do go full screen 2 players. And in the beginning of the section we just saw that landed here, we had the airplane come and we went cinematic with that single camera position. And now we're in a top-down perspective. Is it one listener? Is it 2 listeners? Are they both in the same place? Are you dynamically positioning those? This is, I guess I'm wondering how you solve that.
So for the entire game, it doesn't matter if you're in the menu or listening to a cutscene, we always have 2 listeners. Because if we would remove one listener, we would remove about 6 dB of signal. So that didn't work. We tried to do that a few times and always relearned the lesson. Oh, we need to keep both listeners.
Yeah.
But Joakim, you can talk a little bit about the full screen panning and stuff.
Yeah, there are a few of those sections, and honestly, it's not too complicated at all. But what we decided to, we still wanted to have that separation per player, and like still allow each player to focus on exactly what am I doing, what obstacles am I facing, what's important to me, all that stuff. So basically, what we do in a situation like this that you have on screen here is that we kind of look towards a point which is like superimposed to the middle of the screen, like a 2D point on the middle of the screen, and then track each player's position relative to the point. So if one of the players, because now obviously we don't have the static relationship of like May being to the left, Cody being to the right. They can go all over, right? So when one player moves towards like one extreme end of the current viewport, they start to get panned through speaker panning towards that side of the screen, pretty much, and all of their all the sounds originating from the players will just follow suit. So it's not at all complicated, but still, like speaker panning when it's used elsewhere, I think it's like highly effective.
Agreed. And seamless transitioning, and just a system that that after a certain point, like you said, when you arrived at it, just kind of step back and let it work, and it does what it was designed to do in a way that supports what's happening on screen, which is the best kind of design. So awesome. Great work. We have one more example.
Yeah. So I think we can start that video straight off, or do you want to start?
I think before we start it, just to introduce that a little bit, it's our last topic really, and it's about the kind of audio vision, the kind of creative vision on the audio perspective. And it's kind of to conclude this talk, we talked a lot about our systems and our tools and our pipelines, but one thing that was really important throughout was really to stay true to our vision and what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and what are the main sort of things that are important that we want to highlight, and how are we going to make this world come to life, not just with systems but also with the sound. And okay, you get the point. So the one word that really sort of came early into our audio vision creation was bigness. That's in part because of the size of the characters. They are very small. They are two tiny little dolls in a world that's become all of a sudden huge in comparison to them. So we wanted to highlight that. But also because of the art style, it's kind of Pixar-ish, and it had a lot of room for exaggeration in the sound design, for us to really put emphasis on things, to make things sound larger than life, to create, we had so many opportunities there to create like cool moments, like wow moments, where like, okay, all of a sudden, boom, this is what's going to happen, and this is what we want the player to pay attention to. And we just didn't want to miss out on these opportunities and really focus on that. So bigness was really sort of the driving force for that vision. So what we're going to listen to now is a gameplay video of one of the last levels in the game. I don't know, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the video, or?
No, I don't know if I need to actually. But Joakim, you had another presentation quite recently where you also like expanded a little bit on this bigness word, like what it meant for us. You could give your input as well.
Yeah, like everything that Anso just said is like it's all bigness. But like if when I try to break it down, like subcategorize it, you have things like dynamics. Obviously, I think it's the foundation of it. The soft sound versus the suddenly the outburst of the explosion and the very big sound. And I think we can all follow that. An exaggeration as well. It's the tool that we always use everywhere in sound design. Like it's like a must, I think, in sound design for it to be for us to be able to hear someone walking and we think it sounds interesting, even though we hear that sound every single day of our life. Exaggeration, brings it to life. And also, I think you, Anso, should expand on the this terminology of subjective importance, like elements. That's something that I think you do so well. You do this the honor.
I think that's it's a little bit exactly what I was trying to explain with guiding the player's attention.
Yeah.
We basically choose which are the elements of subjective importance, which means we're the ones choosing what are the important elements. It's not objective in any way. It's like what we as designers want the players to focus on and want to drive the story with, the audio storytelling as well. So I think we had a lot of choices to make and collaboration as well on that, and be clear on what is the intention here. And then the tools like HDR were super useful to sort of support that vision, to say, okay, this is the most important. So obviously it's not going to be the lowest in HDR value, right? It's going to be pretty high on the list so that it's really heard at all times. Things like that.
I feel like most of these things that we have spoken about, like technical systems, like we used Azimuth, we have the 3D panning, we have the HDR amongst some of them, and all of these actually like kind of, all turn out to become subjective importance. Like which player is looking at the thing, what is important during this part of the game, and also we played the game a lot together. where we just sat and like, oh, but it feels like we should already like be hearing this sound. Let's swap out the shared attenuation so that we have a longer one, so that we can hear it before we actually end up there, and so on. So I feel like it's a creative mindset that we had and a direction, and it shows itself in many different places.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it. Each of you, as you were explaining it, touched on this, but kind of bringing it back to a higher level. We've got the collaboration with the overarching story. We've got the, humans translated into tiny dolls, right? So this idea of bigness is like, as you've explained, from a sound design, a subjective importance perspective, how do you want to focus the listener in the sound piece of this? Well, is really in support of that higher level narrative of the scale of the world in the story that's being told, right? Between real people and this doll-based interaction, right? And I won't go too deep into the story side, but again, it feels like this is all part of that bigger arc of storytelling that the game is trying to communicate.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
So I guess we can start the video, and then we will probably talk about a few different sounds that we will hear during the video as well. So
Cody,
instantly,
over here!
bigness.
Wow, they're definitely real.
Oh, did you hear that? I'm like, oh,
We wanted to show this level because it's
Magnificent
full
piece
of
of art.
fun sounds, and it's
I love
music
it.
themed. So we knew that like this one we really have to do something grand for. And something that I could just mention whilst we listen is May's ability in this level. She can sing and make objects move. So we will actually see it quite soon here.
This is when the hi-hat is rising.
Yeah, exactly. So just to give a little bit of insight into that one, was me and Joakim actually started. We wanted to create a vocal synth, you could say. So we wanted to record assets and play them depending on what tone we had in the music and so on. It ended up with a sheet with like 6,000 assets, which was absolutely crazy. We went back to the drawing board, and instead what we made was, we recorded a singer, Sanya. She sang to each of the music tracks in this level, and we just made a very nice, fancy volume fader that fades up when she's singing, and then depending on the tones afterwards.
Perhaps you could just pause the video here for a moment.
Yeah, we can do that. So depending on what notes are coming up, we decide how fast to fade out, or if we prevent the fade out until we have a nice tone to fade out on or over. And now back to Joakim.
Yeah. So we're coming up what the guys are getting at here is that I rave about this scene. Is one of my favorites in the entire game. So this is another one of these 2D sections that you sometimes see throughout the game, and you can see that the players traverse this, like we call it the music tech wall, pretty much, because you can see all of these like familiar equipment to anyone who's ever been in a studio, and they're about to jump on these like magnetic reels, the tape decks there. And the Cody player down at the bottom there will rotate them so that the May player can traverse them. And when we got to this point, and Anso, you designed these like awesome sounds for these tape decks when they move, and like how you would expect like that iconic sound of like a magnetic tape getting manipulated as it's playing audio. And so what we then tried like doing with that, and then actually we do that, is that we manipulate the music playing here with this as well. So the music is separated left channel and right channel. So when when Cody manipulates the left hand reel, we either play the left side music forward or backwards. So we had like actually baked content, which was that music track playing in reverse. And then we play that faster or slow depending on how fast you're manipulating this, and same thing for the right. So we can play the video and hear that happen, and like you can sometimes we will just be affecting the left music or the right music. Sometimes they will both move in different directions at the same time, and then just through some clever seeking, we make it so that whenever you stop, they sync up perfectly. So they'll never actually go out of sync with each other. As soon as you stop manipulating it, we seek to what we track as this is the current position in the music, and on the other side of it, it will be still synced. So I think it's fantastic, to be honest. That's all I gotta say.
It's really cool.
Okay, we're gonna listen to it, and then I want to come back with questions. Here we go.
Let's go. I think it's just like the music together, like again, like with Anso's sound that's already on, like the actual sound effect playing when you rotate these, they just come together so nicely.
Kind of like that it's not overdone either. It's for the audio nerds out there.
Pretty much, yeah. And that like this music track is so slapping, and it just like we knew we had to do something here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, wow. Like, yeah, it's got all the candy for audio folks for sure, and yet it's never distracting. It always falls right back into place. It's so synchronized. As you mentioned, like the track never falls out of sync between left and right. And something that you haven't even mentioned, but I know is extremely complicated, are dynamic animations like this. So where the player has agency and control over, you know, the duration, the speed, like these, that's hard. That's hard. And so what you've got is you've got that tied into the sound of the tape moving that you're representing that. Is it tied to the animation? Is it using callbacks? Like, what's the technique there?
No, we're actually looking straight towards like how much is the player actually rotating this thing, and like at what speed.
Yes.
So I think that's the fun part, because like if you just go full speed instantly, you'll end up with this like garbled mess, which is like, it sounds cool, but like if you actually do it really slowly, at that point you can still clearly make out that it is like we're not just actually playing a sound effect, which is this garbled mess. It's like it is the music that's playing. If you go really slow forwards or backwards, like it'll play pitched up or pitched down and slower. So I think that's the beauty of it, is that it's 100% tied to like the actual what the player is doing. So like when you're really trying to line up these platforms perfectly, at that moment you'll get this like, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes you can even like really get it, like, you know, if you speed it up and then you slow it down, and like you get them to match so nicely. Of course, that's done with the clever seeking, but it really feels so rewarding. You're just like, oh, I made them go in sync again.
Right. And this is a very musical example of that dynamic animation interaction. And this is a technique that's used throughout the game, because there's lots of interactables throughout that have this dynamic component, and you're just reusing that same technique when it's a Ferris wheel instead of a tape deck, for instance. Am I right?
Yeah,
wherever we can, pretty much. This one was like very, very, very specific to this implementation. But yeah,
but yeah, we do that a lot with like all the interactables. Like they should have their own life, and you know, of course, sometimes even I remember some places where we had these things where like you rotate on something and the players instantly start like in one speed, and it just goes one speed, and then you stop.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel like nice. For us with sound, we want it to be a little bit, you know, have its own life.
It's old and busted, new hotness, right? It's like, this is very much the way that the that I feel like today we should be engaging in these kind of dynamic opportunities in games and at runtime. It's super
for sure.
powerful. Like you said, that synchronicity, bringing people to that real-time interaction, real-time moment, and that across all of the different aspects is a really powerful tool. The bigness side of this, of course, you know, you can't ignore the instruments in the space, navigating that space, you know, and this is a continued theme throughout the game as well, is just that juxtaposition of the size of the characters and the room that they're in, all really contributing to that overarching goal of bigness as well. Should I keep rolling in the video? Is there more to see?
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah, you can do that.
Trippy.
Yeah.
I see you on a monitor.
Keep your eyes on those knobs.
Okay.
There's also some interactivity here. You can hear, like, as these EQ bars move across the screen, we kind of filter as well, based on like the filter movement that the player is inputting will also affect. You'll hear this filter sweep be filtered by that movement.
Oh, that's so cool.
And here as well, like that interactivity as you were talking about, like the creaking and the squeaking of the It was something that was kind of like built in for us as well. That was, of course, quite tricky sometimes to get right, but when you do, it feels really nice.
And so loops, these are loops, one-shots based on...
It's a mix, actually.
Loops, okay.
It's yeah. Of course, every object will be designed differently, but this one specifically, I think if I remember correctly, it has at least one loop and a couple of one-shots squeaks that are triggered when it goes above a certain like velocity threshold.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so it's a physics object that's pivoting at a point, and when it's in motion, you bring up the fader on the loop. When the motion, I don't know, maybe over time or based on velocity, we'll fire off a little one shot here and there, and bring that kind of that random piece to it. Again, just like this is the way you do it today, right? And what a great game and opportunity to leverage that technique.
And using like filters, pitching, volume, maybe even 2 layers sometimes, one fast, one slow, depending on what your need is to make this object feel alive.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, rolling.
What's that? Is it a microphone?
I think so.
Well, okay. The book said we need mics to prep the stage.
I'm going to pause it there for a second because we had... I took your camera away for a second because I wanted to draw attention to that musical scroll that comes across. And so I'm going to actually do something crazy. Wow, you got moved to the side.
Oh, yeah.
And here we go. So this was that musical patterning that you were talking about. And so when that's triggered by May in the game, you see the note representation. What a cool thing. Love it. Okay. I'm going to keep you over here for a while and keep rolling.
So yeah, I was going to say that it's also a good example of this variety in the player abilities in this level. Like May has her own complex singing ability that requires its own system, while Cody has its own symbol that he plays with that requires its own system as well.
Nice. Because the symbol blows things up.
Cody.
And these platforms as well, that was one thing that we had to do a lot of places, like we had these little wiggles on the platforms, and that was also like an opportunity for us to make these squeaky sounds. And they were, like, to me at least, some of the hardest sounds to make. So it fits the object, the movement of the object, but it was really rewarding when you got it right.
Yeah. Animation-based, physics-based?
I think it was physics-based, actually.
Yeah, okay.
It's actually simpler than that. It's a trigger, and the object knows when a player basically enters the trigger.
Oh, right.
So then you know that for those simple objects, where it's always the same kind of interaction, and it's so easy, you just sync your sound to the trigger, and you know that it's always going to play the same way.
Yeah, but then we track also sometimes I know, like, the player velocity, for example, say, and like, does it sway hard or less hard?
Yeah, some were a bit more complicated than others.
Yeah.
Please don't stop me. Please don't stop me.
This level is an audio designer's dream, isn't it?
It is.
A bit of a love letter, yeah.
Yeah.
And a composer's dream.
Yeah.
As well, yes.
Our dear friend Gustav sure had a lot of fun here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll mention it now as I did in the beginning, the Interactive Music Symposium, the video with Gustav and Christopher, yes, exactly. Available on the Audiokinetic YouTube channel. Worth digging into to go deep on the music side of things. It Takes Two.
So I guess here you will hear bigness for real.
Here's our last big boom for the day, I guess. Enjoy it.
Yep.
Hang on, superhero!
Oh, no! Hey! I'm having my breathing thing!
He's getting closer!
I swear this must be that book's fault!
I think we're the ones who killed those snakes! Opening the door! Close the gate!
Please, I don't want to become snake food! Oh, that was a little too close for comfort.
What a joy and delight. Wow, that was big.
It was pretty much all we had left.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, so you got the big dramatic slowdown in the middle of that. Voices pitching. This is all dynamic or?
Yeah.
Great.
All dynamic.
Okay.
So we had quite a lot of instances actually with slow-mo in this game. So we basically used some RTPCs for that, pitched different things, actually removed some stuff from the mix even, and also had some accomplishing sound effects to that slow motion. So like a start, loop, stop kind of thing.
Nice. And you're getting a value from the game for time, using time dilation as a RTPC, just modifying what you need during those times, whether it's mix related, pitch related. And question coming in from the chat, did you use external sources for VO, or were they all part of the Wwise project?
They were all part of the Wwise project, except one thing. With the we wanted to make it accessible for people who have some troubles with the menu. So we had some external voices for that. So basically menu narration, but that was the only thing.
Gotcha. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm going to just echo something in the chat just now. Such a great presentation. So many great moments. Interesting things you guys came up with. Well done from G-Book in our chat. What an adventure we have been on today. Thank you so much for taking us through that precision level of detail. And it's everything, right? It's systems, it's creative intention, it's artistry, technology, it's all of these things. And I really appreciate you bringing that to folks out there working with interactive audio. It in my mind, this, you know, I know you've been out and doing this presentation now for a while, which as someone who recognizes the value in advocacy in our industry, both inside a development studio, which I think we've heard a lot about today, you know, your commitment to carry that forward outside of the studio and involve people in that process in the larger community, both in the audio community and game development community, is a testament to your passion and commitment to your craft. And so thank you for spending almost 3 hours with us today digging into this. There's a few folks still rocking it in the chat. Thanks for carrying through with us. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure for us too, and all the people out there listening, that means a lot to us. And we just want to share and the fun that we have had and the trouble as well, and you know, just like hopefully inspiring people to just love their job and love audio and games.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching and for your patience today and staying with us.
3 hours, that's dedication.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Might be the longest one we've done, so I'm into it.
Yes.
I like it a lot. Well, great.
We like records.
Can't wait to hear what you get up to next. Take a few victory laps. Congrats on all the nominations for audio, and you know, wishing you the best in your next pursuits. I know we'll be talking.
You so much.
And folks out there on Wwise Up On Air, this has been an exciting time, and I hope everyone is heading into the year end with excitement. And we'll see you on the other side. Take care.
Thank you, Damien and Masha, as well.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.